And we are back with the pursuit of ownership. I am here with our very own George Hariri, and I'm sort of going to be piggybacking on him again today, just like we did with our episode with Donald. And he is going to be on with another friend of the show, of course, and co-host Clay Schwinke, who is going to be talking to us about some predicaments that he's experiencing.
I'm going to no offense to Clay and Aaron on this one, but this has become Tyler's show. I think this is Tyler's pursuit of ownership. It's TPO, Tyler's pursuit of ownership.
I think that fits pretty well. I think this.
Yeah, this is. I mean, I think the word co-host. I don't know. I think it's collaborators. Yeah, I think we're Clay. You just got downgraded.
Yeah, I hate that my upgrade resulted in other people's downgrade.
It's life.
Yeah. They're not the only ones that
for you to be hired, somebody had to be fired.
Yeah. It's yeah.
So no, I love this though. I wanted to give you guys a shout out because I am an evening and morning person, depending on the day. And sometimes both in the same day. I have a lot of energy. And Clay is up. It is 11:15 p.m. Clay's time, 12:15 past midnight Tyler's time. And we are starting an hour-long episode. I want to acknowledge them. This is true determination. And so for those of you listening on your commute, hats off to these guys for getting up or staying up to make sure this content happens. So thank you.
Well, you can acknowledge us when we actually finish this episode because I'm not entirely sure I'm going to make it, but we'll do our best.
Yeah.
I mean, either way, it's happening. So maybe you just miss the second half and then you doze off, and Clay and I will take it home.
Fair enough. I can live with that. All right. So anyway, Clay, let the audience know a little bit about what your predicament is and why we're all here at this time of day.
Well, I think it was kind of like an impromptu recording, but in our chat that we basically talk to each other every single day, the shared practices chat, George brought up something with insurance credentialing, and especially he was mentioning his timeline when working with essentially people that negotiate your insurance, different fees for different insurance companies, and how you mentioned how it took a long time. And in my kind of situation, I'm not an owner of a practice, but I'm definitely wanting to own the practice that I'm working in right now. I just didn't know what my timeline should be when I should actually reach out to companies like this. And I was just trying to get some clarity on what does that even look like? Because I have no idea. I mean, right? Like I want to buy the practice. I kind of think what to look for in a practice, but then once we find the right practice, what does that insurance credentialing? I know you mentioned the different business tax ID and entities and all this kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of I'm more curious than anybody, I think.
So you didn't refer back to season 2, episode 15 regarding this topic?
I faintly remember that there was an episode about it. And I was
honestly, that was the episode. You can test my memory on that one. I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure it was season 2, episode 15. But anyway, so yeah, I think the reason I wanted to do this episode, Clay, is I have, in the last 2 weeks, I have probably gotten 20 different variations of an insurance credentialing question. I don't know what's going on in the world. I think it's all these associates graduating and becoming, and then you have associates, our clients are hiring associates. And then we have people buying practices. I mean, I don't know. There's like 3 different ways that you can verify insurance or a credential for insurance. And so I think if we address the entire topic first, then we talk about it in your situation, I think that'll help our audience the most. Oh, Tyler, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think so too. I think that insurance credentialing is probably something that, it's a hot button item that people are aware of. But when you get down to brass tacks and you start talking about the specifics of, how you actually implement it, the timing and everything, it all gets a little bit confusing. So I think we do need to kind of establish, what it really is and what it really means for you.
Cool. Clay, do you mind if I just kind of talk for like a few minutes about it, or do you have anything you want to ask before I get started?
No, I think I don't know. I think I know more than the average bear, but I mean, kind of take somebody through like why are we talking about this, and why, like, what does it actually mean to be credentialed, and
Sure.
Can I be billed under, all the ins and outs and just broad strokes, kind of what is it?
No, that's good. I'm happy you slowed me down because I was going to get into the specifics at first. So the credentialing insurance is when you're adding a new provider to a practice. The provider has to be signed up with the insurance plans that practice takes. So that comes into play in two different ways. Either an associate is being added to an existing practice, or a new dentist is buying a practice. So in either situation, the associate needs to be, or the new dentist, whether they're an associate or owner, needs to be credentialed with insurance so that they can bill insurance under that dentist's name, and your in-network and your patient's benefits and everything will kind of be smoothly operated. Where this could potentially fall is you have an insurance company like Delta, who out of network will send the patient a check. So if I buy a practice and am not credentialed with Delta, I submit a claim as if I'm in network, then they send the patient the check for the treatment I just did, and the patient already paid their portion and now they just got paid back. And so now I have to go collect that money from that patient. So it's just that not being in network when the patient thinks you're in network is a problem. So that's why we're talking about this. Was that a confusing or was that a straightforward explanation of this?
No, I thought it was pretty good. I mean, because I'm in an office with PPOs. Some of them are Delta, and I know, looking at a practice that has Delta Premier versus Delta PPO, I think that's a kind of, people bring that up a lot, I think, and the value of the practice. But yeah, I think broad strokes, I think you kind of
Okay.
explained it.
So I'm not going to talk Delta Premier for a while. Let's tackle the straightforward situation before we get to Delta Premier. So now the differentiator is if I'm an associate, either an owner adding an associate or an associate joining a practice. In those two situations, the business that is billing insurance is not changing. So that is treated differently than if I'm buying a practice, right? Because I'm buying a practice, I'm setting up my separate LLC or business entity,
Right.
and then that business entity is collecting from insurance now. So that's where it's the EIN, the tax identification number for the business. That's where the difference is. So let's go through the associate situation, right? You were an associate in this practice. They credentialed you with insurance at some point.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is, there was no change in the employer identification number, the EIN. So the business itself was the exact same. So they can bill under your seller's name, no problem. Because anytime you onboard a new dentist, you have 6 to 9 months to get them signed up with insurance before you really should be billing under the correct providers. So like I added an associate 6 months ago, and we are still billing under my provider, but it's the correct EIN. That's the important piece. The EIN, the business entity, is the correct one. And we have 6 to 9 months to get her credentialed with all of the insurance companies we take and then get that properly sorted out. And so she's wrapping up that process. But it's easier with an associate. So if you are an associate starting in a practice, or if you are hiring an associate, credentialing with insurance is very straightforward. You credential, and until you're credentialed, you submit under the existing dentist's provider name and information. And then after you are credentialed, then you just do it the way it should be. So that's the straightforward situation. That does not apply to you.
Correct.
Yours is the other one of EIN. And when you have a new business, so if you were submitting under the seller's credentials, you're saying the seller's entity provided the dentistry when in fact your entity provided the dentistry. That is a much bigger problem. That is where you cannot do that. And so I say cannot do that because you're not allowed to do that, but everybody does that.
So does it take the normal, like you said, 6 to 9 months to change over fully that, like that EIN number that the new business is doing all the dentistry? How long does it take for that to actually change over? And
I would say 3 months.
Okay.
So the fastest it can be done is 3 months. The slowest it can be done is like 6 to 8. And the difference between them is how much you negotiate. So if you are like, so I bought my practice and go one, I said, first thing I want to do is credential as quickly as possible with everybody, so all my patients are in network as quickly as possible. And that's the play I recommend for most buyers. So most buyers who buy a practice, once the LOI is submitted, and sometimes even till after that, because the insurance company could potentially call the practice, and then now the staff is aware of the fact that there's a buyer. That is why you don't typically credential until the broker tells you it's okay, or someone in the process tells you it's okay, or even on close, because you don't want to tip off the team that you are buying the practice. That is usually the concern. You are in a very unique situation because the team already knows that you are the next owner of the practice.
Mm-hmm.
You have a date where you're going to buy it sometime later this year, potentially. So you can take the longer route of 6 to 8 months and get the best fees possible day one. That's why I was telling you that you should probably start credentialing faster. And it's very few buyers are going to be in your situation. You're in the practice already. You know what the practice is. Your team already knows. And I have 6 months until I'm going to own the thing. That's not common.
Right. So there's
George, can I stop your train of thought?
Missing.
Yeah. So George, one of the things you just said was you want the best fees possible on day one. So can you make the connection between credentialing and renegotiating fees? Because I think we might be missing something there.
So the problem is you have to pick. Do I want my patients to be out of network for months and take the best fees possible? Or do I want to be in network as fast as possible and I take potentially not as great of fees the first time around? And then 2 years from then, I will get the better fee. Either way, 2 years from the time you take over, you'll probably end up with about the same fees because you'll have to renegotiate after about a year.
Mm-hmm.
But I view, and this is where people have differing opinions. Personally, I think it's a very risky thing to do in a PPO practice for your first 6 to 8 months of ownership to not be in network.
What does that mean? What does that look like?
That means that your front desk are going to be. No.
Are you just
that means patients are going to be figuring out that you're not a network. That means your insurance estimates are going to be more challenging for your front desk. That means there's going to be a lot of write-offs on the back end, and there's a lot of adjust. It's just a really complicated thing to have to bill out of network but still treat your patients like you're in network. That's the way you handle this situation in the interim. I see how, as I'm explaining it, I'm trying to make it simple, and I feel like it's coming out more complicated.
Because I guess my question is, okay, so what? So what if I'm out of network? What does that actually mean for my patients, for my practice that I just bought? Is it going to mean that I'm not going to have income for the next?
So let's say no.
Or is it just?
Let's just say
all the extra work you're saying.
Your in-network fee for a crown is $800. Your UCR fee for a crown is $1,200. So you submit your patient pays, so you have two ways of handling it. The way that's suggested is that you tell your patient as if they're in network, right? $800 for a crown, you pay half as $400, and then we bill for the second half, right?
Yeah.
So then in an ideal world, you'll bill for that second half. The insurance will pay you $600, half of their $1,200 that you billed. And then technically the patient was supposed to pay $600, not $400. So then you have to write off the extra $200 so that the patient pays $400. You wrote off $200. The insurance, actually you made extra $200 in that situation. Sounds pretty great. The patient gets a letter from your insurance company saying that you are seeing an out-of-network provider and you could have paid less if you go to an in-network provider.
Right.
That's every insurance, not Delta.
Yeah.
Delta, it is the patient gets a check for $600.
Yeah.
So,
so start credentialing now.
Right. And that's a headache for your front desk because then they are having to Swiss Army knife the, all these write-offs and adjustments. And then you don't know what are real adjustments and what are these insurance-based adjustments that I'm writing off on all, every filling you do, you're collecting the wrong amount. Everything you do, you're collecting the wrong amount. And on top of that, your patients are all getting told by their insurance companies that you're out of network. And you're telling the patients you're a new buyer, you're in network. We still take your insurance. And so it's like you're trying to transition your practice out of network for like 6 months, and then you're going to go back in network. And a newly acquired practice, patients are already looking for a reason to leave.
Right.
And I'm not saying that like that's like they're like, but if you give them a reason to leave, like they have no goodwill with the buyer. You bought a practice that cash flows off of these PPO fees. So I would, and right, I'm not I don't want to scare people from the situation, but like usually you get 2 months of it. I think 60 days, for the most part, after 60 days, if you credential quickly, you're in network with most companies, maybe 1 or 2 stragglers, but like 90% of your patients are in network and they're all happy. But 6 to 8 months is very different than 60 days. 6 to 8 months is like, that's an ongoing problem. I personally, as a new owner, would not want to deal with that.
So, I mean, this situation does not have to be the headache that it sounds like, right? I mean, if you do this right, it doesn't necessarily have to be quite as bad as you're making it sound, right?
So the very typical, like we have a lot of new owner clients. So, I see this and it's like, hey, how's it going? First month of ownership. Yeah, we credentialed with most, couple stragglers. Second monthly coaching call is, hey, I got pretty much everyone, but, United Concordia, patients are doing fine. It's no biggie. A few write-offs are coming in, but for the most part, we're handling it. And then month 3, you're done. I think the first 3 months of practice ownership include a lot of transferring utilities, transferring all the accounts, all the payables that come into the practice, all the bills that seller pays, transferring all those accounts over to the buyer's name. And so I think the first 3 months of ownership is a lot of annoyance. And this is one of those annoyances. But by month 3, it's gone in most situations. All of your payables are up to date. All of your, everything is in place month 3, including insurance credentialing. The headache comes if you just have this lingering front office issue. That like 8 months from now, I don't want to be dealing with that.
Right.
No, but insurance credentialing is not a pleasant situation. And that's why I was telling Clay, the fact that you don't own the thing yet and you have the time to fully credential. So startups have it this way too. Like when they do construction, they're credentialing. And so the whole time that they're going through construction, they have their address, they have their entity, and then it's all signed up. So they can be credentialed when they open. Acquisitions, it's different because the team can't tell the team. So, I mean, the startup has a sign up there saying, right. Exactly. If all the whole team. So Clay has this very unique situation where the entire team knows. He knows what practice he's buying. He knows what insurances they take. So he should be credentialing.
To get, like you said, to get the best fees.
Yeah, you get the best of both worlds. You get to be in network on day 1 with good fees. I think that's like a 1 in 30. I would say 1 in 30 buyers have that situation.
So am I going to be negotiating and doing all this myself?
Who else is going to do it? Like, oh no, you hire a negotiator.
Okay.
Yeah. No, some buyers will contract themselves and will call these insurance companies. I like to hire somebody to just get it done as fast as possible. Like, just get me in network, please, ASAP.
Is there any downside if it gets done early, like before I actually assume ownership? It's just ready and waiting.
Yeah, no, that's the goal. The goal is to be done before ownership.
Right. So really, there's not any particular reason to wait, is there?
That's why I was kind of confused. I was like, Clay, why haven't you already done this? Yeah.
I did.
Yeah. That's why Clay was like, should I be negotiating or when should I negotiate? I'm like, yesterday? What? Like, why are we doing this already? Yeah, just have it ready. I mean, it's just, you're just accepting fees. Like, you're just pre-negotiating a contract. You have a license number. You can do dentistry.
Right.
You're just establishing that relationship.
Right.
Yeah, I would do that day 1.
Is the credentialing process any more laborious depending on what the practice you're looking at actually carries? Like, depending on the insurance, coverage. Like, if it's got Medicaid, a whole lot of PPO. If it's a whole lot of
Medicaid is a nightmare.
Okay.
Yeah, if it's PPO, you pretty much fill out. So with these negotiators or these insurance credentialing services, you fill out one form, and then they take the information you filled out on that one form, and then they fill out 8 forms for you using that information. So it's just like a 8-page packet with all kinds of crap that you have to fill out. I hated it. I hate it every time. Yeah, like, ugh, yeah.
It's a necessary evil, right?
Yeah, my office manager does that crap. I can't stand. I cannot stand insurance credentialing packages. Yeah, no. Right, and am I making it sound bad? I'm not trying to make it sound bad.
No, it's
You
just
make
an
it
annoyance that, that sometimes that I mean, I overlooked it, and I'm
right.
sure other people have 1,000 other things on their mind when they're trying to figure out, "Is this the right practice for me?" And then they find the right practice. And I guess if you are in the situation where you have the time, everyone knows that you're gonna be buying the practice, then get off your butt and start doing it, which is
Right.
what I need
Tyler,
to
you were
do.
gonna say something?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much what Clay just said is one of those sort of overlookables. It's something that it's just it can be a nuisance if you don't get it taken care of, if you don't know to take care of it at the given time. But if you get on top of it, it really doesn't have to be that big of a deal. At least that's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah, and that the point I was making is people think it's the same for an acquisition as it is for an associateship. It's very different. It
Right.
is no biggie for an associateship. I honestly recommend just kind of waiting a month before you even start the credentialing paperwork to make sure the associate's a fit. Because if you're on the ownership side, but for an acquisition, it is definitely it is a speed bump, right? It's like this thing that you have to go over that's going to be annoying, it's uncomfortable, and then you move past it, and you forget about it.
Right. So in terms of taking over the practice and having to create a new entity, can you talk a little bit about that process?
Mhm. Yeah. So most practices you buy, if unless it's like seller's last name dental, and I'm going to change it to my last name dental.
Right.
If it's not that, typically, so I guess we can use my practice. I mean, I've never actually said my practice name on air, but I assume people just Google me and figure it out. So I don't think it's like a secret. So my practice is called Arrowhead Family Dentistry, and so Arrowhead Family Dentistry LLC is taken by my sellers.
Right.
So I had to create a separate entity, and you can call it whatever you want, but it's going to be on every check you sign. So make it something that not like George's LLC or something stupid like that. That like I think I'm being funny, and then it's like every check I sign is like George's LLC. Like so like call it something reasonable.
Okay.
Like so like right Clay, like maybe something like Schwinky Dental, or something where it's like just
Yikes.
Like
you
it's
know, or like
Yeah,
Center Kansas. I don't know, like
yeah, Kansas City
anything.
Dental LLC, yeah, yeah,
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure that's taken, but like
yeah, right.
anything, and then you create the entity, and then once you buy the practice, then you submit a doing business as. So typically, that's the way you'll do it: is doing business as, and then the name of your practice, so that you can cash checks that are made out to your practice name, even though that's not your entity name.
right. That makes sense.
Yeah, and so
So
most sellers took the name of the practice already. If it's not taken, then I would just like to make an LLC with that name.
okay. That makes
Yeah.
sense. So I'm curious, do we want to tackle the bear of Delta Premier in this episode?
Um,
I know we alluded to it earlier.
hmm. The problem is it's so state specific.
Right.
So can I talk about the problem in generalities and then just leave it at that?
Let's
Sure.
do that.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm sure we're going to start with what is Delta Premier.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
I
a
was
good
not
start.
expecting a Delta Premier. This is like talking about COVID. It's like
Well, you
it's
shouldn't have
like
brought
two
it up.
topics I really don't like.
I don't
I
know
didn't
why you
bring it
brought
up.
that
I
up.
did not bring up Delta Premier once.
I think it was
That was Clay.
yeah, I brought that up.
Um,
Clay
yeah,
shouldn't
Delta.
have brought it up. But
So
Sorry, guys.
a Delta Premier is this insurance that's it's what do they call it? Like an indemnity plan. It's like a very early on insurance that used to pay like full UCR and now pays like 90% of full fee. And it's about I think like 30-ish% higher than Delta PPO. So um gosh, I love how I'm not allowed to say fees. So um I think like 30 to 40% is the difference in reimbursement on a Delta PPO, which is like the regular Delta that everyone takes, and then the very select few practices that are on this Delta Premier only plan, um, they get these cushy fees, like, close to full fee. And Premier has gotten like a little bit worse over the years, but it's still like the best insurance, out there. And so what a lot of dentists do is they cut the ones that are fee for service. They call themselves fee for service, but really they are fee for service, but they take Delta Premier.
Sure.
And so, because Delta Premier, from your patient's perspective, most patients have Premier plus PPO benefits. I think like 70%, 80% of Delta patients have both benefits, which means they can go to a PPO practice and they can go to a Premier practice. And they don't really feel the difference a whole lot. Their cleanings are free, sometimes they have to pay a little bit, but for the most part, it's a very similar experience. So these dentists, the older dentists that are grandfathered into the Delta Premier program, are loving Delta Premier because it's like in Tucson, where I'm from, my mom sold her practice to a listener of the show, and she was a fee for service plus Delta Premier. And Delta Premier is one of the three biggest employers in Tucson, are like a very large portion of her practice. They all were Delta Premier patients. And so, she just took it's like they went to her because she took their insurance, but she was fee for service. And so when a buyer buys a practice like that, they can no longer take, it's state specific, but they are not accepting new entities or providers in a lot of states. And so now, the revenue and the cash flow that you make based on these higher fees gets deducted. And so what you have to do is you have to go and calculate what percentage of the practice is Premier, and then recalculate all the fees with PPO fees, like by just taking a cut. Like, let's just say 20% of the practice is, actually, that'd be great if 20% of the practice was Premier, and it's like a 30% cut on 20% of the practice, then you lose 6% revenue. And so you take 6% revenue off the top, and that is your new revenue, and your costs are the exact same.
Right.
And so, that if your overhead is 40%, or sorry, if your profitability is 40%, your overhead 60, now your overhead is, 64%, and your profit is, 36 or whatever. So it just, that was terrible math. But the point is
checks out. It checks
that the point is that, like, you are now equal, you are just immediately less profitable.
Right.
And so you have to look at a practice and say, okay, am I in a state where I can get Premier status or not? And every broker on earth will tell you, yeah, you can get Premier status, no problem. Last week, I just sold a practice to somebody who signed up with Premier, no biggie. Cool. You got to call Delta, and you got to tell them, hey, I'm buying a Premier practice. Can I sign up with Premier only? Because if you say, can I sign up with Premier, they're going to say yes, because they're going to sign up with Premier and PPO.
And PPO. Yeah.
And then they give you PPO fees. Everyone can sign up. I'm signed up with Premier. Also PPO, I take PPO fees. So you say, can I sign up with Premier only? And you need a signed letter from Delta saying that they will allow you to sign up for PPO or Premier only.
Right.
If you get that letter, you tell the broker, I'll honor the revenue currently it stands. If you don't get that letter, then I would want to, and this is the thing, because this is the typical pre-owner problem. There are stupid buyers out there that'll pay full price for the practice. Cool. So what I would have to do is, right, first you always try to renegotiate. You try to say, hey, are you willing to drop the blah, blah, blah? And they'll probably say no. So then you have to project what revenue will be without the fees. And then you will have to decide if that's good enough still.
Right.
I mean, some cases it could be, right? I mean,
yeah, for sure.
It just depends on the profitability of the practice.
Like there was this practice I was looking at with this guy, it was $1 million ish in collections, 50% overhead, solo office, small, listed for like some reasonable amount, 700 something. And I was like, okay, well, I mean, hey, if it's doing 900 and you're making, $300K and you paid $700,000 for that practice, like, are we happy? He's like, yeah. I'm like, cool, then buy it. No issues, so like,
it's not all doom.
At 300K take home after debt service, like, yeah, we're good. So it's a case by case thing. But where you really get in the problems, I saw this nightmare practice on actually this guy ended up being a practice underwater guest for a different practice. So he was on Practice Underwater. His name's Tom on Practice Underwater. But he was looking at this practice, and it was huge. And he messaged me about this personally, and it was slim profit margins. It was a group practice, like multiple doctors. He had to pay associates, and on top of that, taking a Delta Premier hit on that practice off the top. Like if your EBITDA is 16% and you're taking an 8% hit off the top, you are losing money.
Right.
And so I think it's the less profitable practices where it becomes an issue. And especially the larger ones, or the ones where it's a larger percentage of the practice, like 60-70% of the practice, and I don't know if that exists or not. But it just needs to be looked at, right? You need to consider it as part of your due diligence. And that's where you pretty much have somebody help you figure that out. That's not something that you should do on your own.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So in other words, this sort of, I think I coined the term overlookable thing can actually end up sort of breaking a deal, right? Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, Delta Premier, I believe. And right, do I have biases, guys?
I think so, yeah.
You?
Yeah, so I am not a fan of fee-for-service practices. I think that is something I have articulated. And so I personally would be quick to kill a deal for a Delta Premier issue. But that also comes out that's my bias coming out as well. So if somebody really wants a fee-for-service practice and that they're just dead set on that model, God bless them, and go buy the Delta Premier practice. I think that's totally fine. You'll have a hit, but if the overhead is fine and you can manage it, like I think I'd say a 50-50 chance. Like if a Delta Premier is involved, like 50-50 chance it'll be okay. I don't think it's a total killer. It just depends on how big and how profitable the practice is.
Right. So I do kind of want to dig just a little bit. It may be tangential, but I mean, you've shown your hand here with your bias against FFS practices.
FFS.
Right. So throughout this entire episode, we've been kind of talking about insurance credentialing and probably giving some people some headaches. And some people might be thinking, well, wouldn't everything just be simpler if it were fee for service? So can you explain a little bit about your negative bias towards that?
Okay. So one thing that we talk about a lot on paired practice is sustainability.
Right.
Sustainability of practice. And doctor dependency is something we talk a lot about in Practice Underwater.
Yes.
And fee for service is a roadblock towards those things in my mind. You're going against the grain. The industry is moving more towards patients going in network. If you look at every research study out there, more and more patients are seeing in-network providers every single year.
Right.
That is not me making up stuff. Right. And I'm not saying it's impossible. It is very possible. If you want to see patients all by yourself for the next 30 years and form a relationship-based practice in a spot that is not, or anywhere, you can do it fee for service. Totally. But everything I just described is also not my bias, right? My bias is towards larger practices, more of a business than a job, right? If you want to own a job, and I'm sure there are group practices out there that are fee for service as well. I'm not obviously that exists as well, but that's against the grain. Everything is built if you want a larger practice to be a network. That is, so my bias that's a group practice bias coming out in this topic. And we don't have to dissect my group practice bias. That is strong enough that comes out, right? But I'll say it this way, Matt, we're transitioning his practice to be a group practice. Richard, we're looking for a group practice. I am buying a second group practice. It's a great model. I'm sorry. I'm not going to apologize. I did not invent it. I just really enjoy it. So, I don't know.
Sure.
No.
Aaron is the holdout right now.
Right.
Yeah,
we'll get him.
So.
We'll get him. Yeah. Aaron's going to be in fee for service, Bodunk, Texas, doing all kinds of. Where is he at? Yeah, we won't say it on air. I don't want to.
Bodunk. Bodunk,
Yeah, he's in Bodunk. Yeah.
Oh man, I love talking.
I hope he hears this.
When they're not here. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know we miss you, Aaron.
We do. So George, one thing you just mentioned about, buying other practices. So that's under your same entity, right? So that still kind of falls under the, there's not really an insurance credentialing issue there, right?
Second practice, second entity.
Okay.
Yeah. No,
fair enough.
that's its own thing.
Yeah. So that's
I Suzanne and I are trying to buy that together, and so her and I being partners, we definitely need our entity and all that stuff.
Right.
No, but I no, and I think at my size of, let's call it, less 3 or less practices, each practice having its own entity is very clean. I think financials being separated per location is just a very good idea, and tax returns and everything. So, I don't love I've looked at those deals. They're a nightmare. When you get somebody's tax return and it's like 3 practices all thrown up on one P&L.
Yeah.
It's like, what is this?
You don't know what's what. You don't know what's
I hate that.
Things get
I am much more on the side every entity per practice, and then you get big enough to the point where everyone needs health insurance, and and then you start doing the other thing. But I don't know who knows what the future holds. But right now I'm just doing it. I'm committing to number 2 and potentially number 3, and after that I'll reevaluate.
Right.
But I think I'm committing to 2 more, and then I'll see.
Yeah. Well, it feels like a short time ago where you were feeling pretty committed to 1.
Oh man, I remember where I was listening to the episode where I told you guys there are no more practices for me ever. And it's like 6 months later, here I am.
Yeah.
No, I think it took COVID, right? Like sitting back, reflecting. And I think it was even before COVID. Clay was in Phoenix, and I was telling him I was pulling the trigger on going to look for number 2. And I'll say this. So, right, I've talked about this before. My one thing I wish I had done differently the first time was buying a larger practice.
Right.
And, I've now in Phoenix, right, my market, I have looked at 4 group practices for sale. And so I think when people tell me that it's not possible in my market, I'm sorry.
We love to prove them wrong, right?
Yeah, I think people need to hear that, because this is very possible. You can buy the practice you want. You don't have to be super, don't have to do a startup because you couldn't find the practice you're looking for. Like, you can be a little persistent, and you can keep looking, and you can find it. They're out there. And so, in my market, that I get emails from buyers who can't find practices in my market all the time. So it's just proper deal finding techniques. And, I think this is, so anyway, besides the point. But yes, I am. And the reason I'm doing number 2, and I've kind of pre-committed to a number 3, but I don't have one in mind. And I think I'm going to wait a while after number 2 before number 3. The number 2 I'm looking at, anyway, I have projects for next year with 2 practices will be plenty. But maybe the year after or later in next year, I'll entertain number 3. But I'm probably only going to buy group practices, 1.8 plus in collections, multiple doctors on day 1. That's the direction I'm going. I'm just going to stick to what I do well. I'm not going to buy a 4-op 600K practice. That sounds like something I never want to touch.
Right.
So those practices are, like you said, you wanted something bigger. So are you only looking at bigger practices?
Yeah. So right now, my practice, if you annualize our collections, are about 2.5-ish. And the one I'm looking at is about the same size.
Okay. Yeah. So we've definitely arrived in a different place than we started, haven't we?
This was insurance credentialing, right?
Yeah,
I think we're still on topic. I'm credentialing insurance for a different practice.
Yeah. I think it's funny to get into talking about what your future plans are, and you talk about, possibly buying more practices if it's some sort of like far off, career stage, but really I can see things being very different in probably 6 months or so. We're talking about practice 4 and 5, and then we're talking about what changed. So it's going to be interesting to see how these.
Yeah, I think so. I'm essentially putting down the handpiece. So
it's been a good run, huh, George?
Yeah. So I'm not putting it down like permanently. I'll be there 3 hours a week just hanging out. But it's I think things have gone faster than I have expected. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
I felt like my career I thought I knew where it was going. I mean, I graduated with solo practice in mind.
Right.
Productive solo for 15 years was my plan.
Yeah.
And then reevaluate. And to think that 2 years after I graduate, I'm really stopping my time as a producer is kind of not what I was expecting.
Is it? I don't know how much you want to get into this, but is that scary?
No, not at all. I mean, it's a new challenge. I'm excited.
Right.
But I mean, this goes back to, and one thing I always talk about is keeping your personal expenses low early in ownership. I mean, liquidity wise, I can go a very long time without any income. So it makes, right, obviously that's not going to happen, but it takes all the, I don't know what else I'd be afraid of.
Right. You weathered a pandemic, so.
Yeah, exactly, right? Like the world was ending 2 months ago, so this is nothing. This is just losing my job. This is nothing. Yeah, no, but like when your practice reaches a point where your EBITDA margin is enough to, justify all of your expenses and, give you a comfortable income, then you can do that. And I get to do that, and I feel very fortunate.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's definitely powerful.
No, but right then that goes back to I've stopped trying to think that I know what's going to happen to me in my life. I think that's the point I was making. Was I have thought I've known so many times, and I've talked with conviction on air about what's going to happen, and now I'm saying I'm committing to number 2 since I'm already like in due diligence and trying to get a deal done, and potentially a number 3, but past that I'm not saying anything either way.
Right.
That's like, because I've learned that life comes at you quick, and it takes you in places and ways you never have thought you'd ever go. And I mean, shared practices, oh my gosh, I've been doing this for 3 years now, and where it is now versus where we started. Like, I remember Richard told me, like, I'm just going to say it now. I'll say it on air. Our monthly revenue was $200 a month when we started. And like, yeah, we were not killing it.
Wow.
And 3 years later to be where we're at and to see where we're going. So I mean, it's just like, who knows where life is going to take you. And I feel very fortunate. I think everything has worked out really well for me. But I'll say this to our audience. I started this show. I did not start the show, but I started on this show 3 years ago as a third-year dental student, like literally in like the exact same place Tyler is sitting today. And I'm telling you guys, Tyler is going to be successful. And Clay's nodding his head, right? And Clay is going to be too. And you listening are also going to be, because you're listening and because you care. And like, I think if you had like, I guess on air 3 years ago said like, this guy George is going to do pretty well, I think people would have believed that. But at the time I was a third year dental student, like accomplishments wise the exact same as every other third year dental student. But mindset, amount of knowledge, time, effort, all those things were different. And those are the things that predicate success. And so I think to our audience listening, you've made it this far in a boring podcast that you keep coming back to. Like, you're going somewhere because of that. And no matter where you're at in your life, that's not where you're going. And I think I like being able to say that, because I used to hope that. Now I know that.
Right.
And like, Tyler, you hope to be successful. Right. I know you will be successful.
Wow.
That's a difference. Like, there is no doubt in my mind, like, at all.
Well, I very much appreciate that, George. I do have some reservations though, just because I feel like, just coming off the note that we were just on, this whole show has just sort of been a chronicle of all the times that you've proved yourself wrong. You just making this future prediction, and then 6 months later saying, "Yeah, well, that was a lie."
Predictions about myself, wrong.
Yeah, he's pretty good.
Right?
At
Predictions
predicting
about
other
what I'm
people.
gonna do, wrong.
All right.
Predictions about what you're gonna do, and that's the thing. Like, people would have looked at me and they would have said, "Dude, solo practice for you for 15 years, not happening." Like, my staff, when I told them, I said, "I'm not buying another practice, guys. Like, calm down." And then they heard on air. They're like, I think I was talking about it with someone. I forgot who. And they were like, "You're buying another practice?" And I was like, "Oh, yeah. Sorry. I forgot to tell you. I'm buying another practice." And like, we knew you were going to do that. We all were like, we're not believing him. And it was like, they knew better than me. And I found out that my seller, she told my office manager, she told her, she goes, "He's not practicing for a long time. Like, not a chance." And I didn't find that out until after I told my staff that I was stepping away. And the fact that she knew that, and I was like in my first month out of school and told my office manager that, and I at that time had no clue what was coming for me.
Yeah.
I think other people can look at you and predict your future much more easily than you can your own. So, I mean, everyone's known me the whole time. Like, "George, nothing you've done has been a surprise." But for me, I've been surprised every step of the way. Like, I genuinely thought COVID had never happened. Me and my associate, I was working 3 days a week. She was killing it. I was killing it. Like, we were in a really good spot. I don't think I would have left for a while. And I kind of was, I'm like, I'll be doing this for a couple of years and then we'll see what happens. And then COVID happened and I got to sit back and really reflect. And I'm like, you know what? I'm doing it now. And so I'm doing it. And then we got back and now we have our hire, and my associate and I are like, "When is she starting? Oh my gosh, like, we need her yesterday," and it was like, I was probably ready for that before COVID too. But it just, yeah, I think, you never know what's going to hit you. And I could have very easily been, not doing this, but I think COVID was the thing I'm most thankful for, is helped me really reflect and realize that I want to do what I was meant to do. And this offers me that opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been able to sort of watch this whole period of time be that catalyst for you. And the amount of change that I think we've all been witnessing has been pretty amazing, but still not terribly surprising. I think that this is sort of an eventuality that was going to happen. And it's happening a little bit sooner than you thought. But
yeah, I've been talking about 1 day a week for, I think, a year now.
Yeah.
I think the half day a week was a bit of a surprise to me, but the day a week.
I just want to say this on air. I've said this to George many times. I'm really tired of you saying half day a week. I'm not buying it.
What do you mean?
It's just it's such an insult. You have to talk in terms of months now. You are.
I told. No,
2 days a month.
Suzanne asked me. She goes, "So when are you going to be at the office?" I go, "Wednesdays from 1 to 4." And she's like, "What? Wednesdays from 1 to 4?" I'm like, "Yeah." I go in after lunch. I'll probably leave by like 2:30, but I'm there till 4. And she's like,
"Not a work week.
That's not a day. You can't even
It's not.
But I'm calling it a half day a week.
Yeah, you're checking.
A 3-hour half day.
You're checking in once a week.
Yeah, I'm hanging out with the team. I'm seeing the patients that want to request me. My daily goal will be 0. I've told the team that. I said we're not purposefully scheduling production on my schedule. It's only the patients that happen to find their way there, because they refuse to see anybody else. So yeah, if I go there and I got nothing to do every day, every week, that'd be a thrill. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I like I said, I'm prepared.
This totally went another way. This was not the topic of conversation for this episode. I was not even planning on talking about this on the podcast for a while.
Yeah.
But
we bring it out of you.
Yeah, I guess it just came up. I didn't know how it came up.
Yeah.
It's funny, every time we record, I always love that we come on. We're like, "What are we talking about?" We'll figure it out on air, and it always ends up being something. But I don't know. I think I love that. I hate planning episodes, so this is just so much better.
Yeah, no, I enjoy the serendipity. Every time we're on, that's kind of what happens.
Yeah, it's funny with Matt. He's like, checklist. You get your questions. Matt is very organized, and it wouldn't be a George episode if I didn't throw Matt under the bus in some capacity. And so I was gonna throw him under the bus for not doing late night meetings. But then remember, it was in our team chat today.
Right.
I was like, yeah, Matt refuses to meet with anybody past 7. That's what I said. And I was going to throw him under the bus. And he goes, George, we're meeting tonight at 8. And I was like, oh.
That's a red eye for Matt, though.
Never mind.
Yeah.
Okay, I can't say that on air since the day I was going to say that we met past 7. Got it.
Well, that's brilliant. And I think that throwing Matt under the bus is a perfect way to end this episode.
Definitely.
Yes.
Yeah. Are you guys going to intro outro this, or is this it?
This is it.
This is it.
All right, guys. Well, then send Matt a PM, something insulting, please. And
yeah, I prefer to do that after he's gone to sleep. I like him to wake up to it.
Yeah.
It's funny. He gets like this wind of energy at like 7 a.m. his time, which is like 4 a.m. my time.
Yeah.
And so I wake up to a barrage of messages from Matt every day.
It gets blown up. Yeah. It's right.
And it's like, dude, just like let me sleep. Like, what are you doing? I love it. Anyway, guys, this was fun. I think we answered the question though. Talked about insurance credentialing. So we're solid.
About an hour ago, I think we.
Yeah, I think
we addressed that, and now Tyler's still awake, so yawned a couple times. So did I. So especially when Clay was talking.
I wasn't the first one.
No, I think I was.
Okay. All right. Well, Tyler, I'll let you close out.
Absolutely. Well, Clay, George, I really appreciate this little midnight ghost story that we had. It was a whole lot of fun. We covered a lot of topics. We got into some sentimental stuff as well as some, good old brass tacks with insurance credentialing. And I really hope the audience enjoyed it. So appreciate it, guys. And I look forward to next time.